Hey guys, in this video tutorial, we're going to be learning how to make band rings. So the processes that we'll cover is sizing and planning, soldering connections, using a ring mandrel, using sanding sticks, and trying out some ring clamps for buffing. The first thing that you need to do is cut a strip of paper that is the max width of your desired design. Next, you're going to measure. To do that, all you're going to do is wrap the paper strip around your finger so it's not too tight and not too loose. And then you're going to mark where the paper overlaps. And then just cut it with scissors at that point. Now you know that you have the perfect size measurements for your ring. I use the strip of paper then to measure out a whole row on my sketch paper, and this is really helpful because you can do a lot of different sketches and make sure that they all are the correct size, so you don't have to do any more sizing. Here's an example of my sketches. I've included positive and negative space, and I just got to play around with all sorts of different designs. So here I have a strip of metal and I know that it's sized correctly, and I'm just bending the ends of the metal up to meet each other. The key is to make sure that these meet up perfectly. So this might take some time and finesse. Right now I'm overlapping them, going past on either direction, and when you separate them, the tension from overlapping should hold the metal together. I'm also using my flat nose pliers to clamp that down and make sure that they're perfectly aligned. Now it's time to solder your connection. Of course, you dip your piece in boric acid and alcohol first. Put that aside where it's not going to catch on fire. Now I'm going to place my ring in the third hand, and when I do this, I make sure that my connection is facing up. Next, I'm going to paint some flux on. I'm just going to paint the flux onto the connection, and I make sure that I get it on the top and the bottom, and it seeps all the way through the connection as well. Next, I'm using some hard wire solder, and I'm going to cut a piece about the size and width of my ring, so the piece of solder will sit on top of the whole connection. I pick it up with my paintbrush and just gently place it and carefully place it where it needs to be. So here's an example. You can see it's perfectly lined up. Next, light your torch. Make sure that your flame is not too big and not too small. Make it an appropriate size flame for your piece of metal. And of course, we're going to start heating this very slowly at first to make sure that that solder doesn't jump like a jumping bean on us. Now that the flux has bubbled up and has set, we can start to apply more direct heat. I'm switching my flame around side to side, and I'm also making sure that I focus my flame on the bottom of my solder connection. So what that is going to do, remember, solder goes where the heat goes. So if we're heating the piece of metal from the bottom, that solder is going to suck down through into that connection. Now that I'm finished, I'm going to quench my whole tool in the water, including the arm, the third arm, because that can sometimes get hot too. And then once I've quenched it, I can pick it up and I can see that my solder connection has been successful. I can see that it flowed inside and out, and it's completely connected. I'm going to put my piece in the pickle pot just for 5 to 10 minutes. Always make sure that you're using copper tongs and not steel tongs, because that can mess up the chemistry of our pickle pot. And always rinse your piece with water before you make contact with your piece of metal that's been in the pickle pot, because that acid can damage your skin. Point, your ring probably won't be in a perfect circle, and that's okay. We're going to use a ring mandrel. and a rawhide mallet, and make sure it has a super soft end on it to round out our ring. So you basically just put your ring on your ring mandrel and pretty forcefully, but not smashing it, pound on your ring until it rounds out. I'm shifting the ring around because this is tapered. I'm going to switch directions and flip it over so my ring doesn't get tapered, and then continue to hit it. So this may take a while. I'm also making sure that I don't hit on the flat side of the ring mandrel. Some of these ring mandrels have flat sides, and I'm avoiding that. That's not something we want to include in our artwork. So continue until your piece is perfectly round, and this process should result in a perfectly round ring. So here's mine, and it looks much better now. Now it's time to file all of the edges of our ring. So I'm making sure that I file each of the sides right by that connection, because that will probably not be a perfect connection to begin with. I'm filing the outside and the inside of my ring too. My goal with this filing is to A, smooth all the edges out, and then B, also get rid of all the excess solder that's on the connection. And you should be able to file it enough to the point where you can barely even see that solder connection. It's just a thin silver line on your ring. Next, we're going to use a sanding stick. We have all different types of sanding sticks, and these are for sanding the inside of your ring. So it works just like regular sandpaper, and we're going to sand until all of our file marks are gone. So there should be sanding sticks that go along with 320, 400, and 600, so you can bring the inside of your ring all the way up to a 600 sand. Next, we're gonna sand the outside using regular sandpaper. We use 320 first, then 400, and then 600. Remember to take your time with 320. It's really important to get all of those initial scratches out with 320 before you move on to any other sanding. And that will ensure that you get a really nice sand job all the way up to 600, all the way around your ring. So once you've sanded, you can move on to buffing. Of course, I'm using the Tripoli wheel first. This is one way that you can buff your ring. You can just put it around your finger, and I'm just kind of hitting it and then rotating it a little bit at a time until I've hit the whole thing. Another tool you can use for buffing is the ring clamp. You just take the wedge out of the backside and clamp your ring in it, and then that protects your hands from getting burned. Always remember to wash out your ring with soap and water in between the buffing wheels so you don't contaminate them. So here's my finished ring. I've finished buffing it. You can see that that solder connection is very thin. You can barely see it. And overall, I think it looks pretty good. Remember that this is just one method. You can use the same techniques to make rings with negative space in them. You can also use the same technique to make wire rings. So if you are interested in making round, thin wire rings, this is a great technique to use as well. That's it. Thanks for watching.